to be eligible for the merit pay, I immediately knew that we had to be kind of on one accord and to see what the attorneys were saying about where we needed to go with this. So at that time, what the General Assembly said was, you know, it's up to the LEA. It's up to each LEA what kind of framework you put this in and how you're going to come about with this 25% of the teachers. So as I attended our RESA HR meetings and our councils, HR people, you know, we would talk about, you know, what ideas are you looking at? What ideas are we looking at? And pretty much a couple of us were on the same line. So we think we've come up with a really good, solid plan for identifying those teachers. And so it was the mandate of the legislation that said that we had to look at the 25% of the top teachers that would be eligible to be recognized for the merit pay. So we wanted to look at something that was very data-driven process, very equitable among our teachers, and very transparent. So when we look at the legislation, it says that the 25% of the teachers, first of all, they have to have 3 consecutive years in their current system. So any teacher we look at has to fit in that category, 3 consecutive years with Franklin County. They also have to have at least proficient on their last, and we can go as far back as the last 3 years on their evaluation. And proficient means that you are a good, solid teacher in the classroom. Because on the teacher evaluation instrument, as we will see later, it has about 4 different categories. Now, it said with this, for those who fall into that pool and are selected, they would be granted a 4-year contract. And that contract would run through July 2014 through June 30th, 2018. But in order to take that merit pay, they would have to give up their tenure. And with that would come $500 in a salary increase each year of the 4 years. So 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, which total would be 5,000. Now, individuals, and we asked this, well, what do we really mean by teachers? So then it was coded that the teacher definition was based, and it covered anybody that was really a teacher or having, and I'll show you different categories in a minute. But those teachers would have to have 3 or more years of employment with Franklin County and proficiency. Okay, who does the pool include? And we talk about the pool being those teachers that have the 3 years that have proficiency or greater on their evaluation. But anyone paid on that teacher scale. And you can see the various categories: curriculum resource teachers, lead teachers, counselors, media coordinators, psychologists, tech facilitators, school psychologists, CTE. So they have the 3 years, and then they would have to have at least 120 days during the first year. In order to meet that then, they would have to have been employed with us on or before December the 7th, 2010. To be a part of this big pool. Okay, employees that were on some kind of approved leave, medical leave, they would still be eligible in those 3 years that they are on an approved leave and out. But those not included in this larger pool are employees who are part-time. They're not even looking at part-time people. They also are not even looking at, since they don't have 3 completed years, they wouldn't be looking at the beginning teachers. Okay, employees who have provided official notice that they're not returning to Franklin County schools would not be part of that pool, or for those who are not legally eligible for employment, which means, for instance, that it might be someone that was going to be non-renewed. Now, in these 2 pools for the selection, all the individuals rated on the North Carolina Educator Evaluation System. And it started out with McCrail, and now it's switched over to True North Logic. But it was during those McCrail years that we look back to see the evaluation, which is really the same rubric as to the system we use now. But those eligible that were not evaluated on the nieces, in case we had any of those, because not everyone's evaluation was on the online form when McCrell started. We have just now gotten some evaluations from different areas like the counselors and the psychologists that are now becoming online. So if we didn't have the kind of instrument to work our formula with, then we would have to come up with a rubric. But so far, we've been very lucky in that we have not had to come up with a different kind of rubric. Okay, additional information. These are some scenarios that you might have. So if an employee has changed types of positions, then wherever they were in that pool in the 2012-13 is what we would look at. So if a person was a classroom teacher, and then this year, and then they moved into a guidance position, whatever they were in that 12-13 year, is that evaluation is what we would go off of. Okay, if they move from one group to another at the beginning of the 13-14 school year, we would move back to see what group they were in for the 12-13 year. And if a teacher moved from one school to another, say like Franklinton Middle School, well, a lot of teachers were moved over there, we would still have to go back to where they were evaluated at that school before they came to Franklinton Middle. And then the superintendent can strike from the list anyone that's had some kind of documented performance or bad review on their evaluation. And we can strike those names from the list. Now, the recommended process for teachers, like we said, we wanted to come up with something we felt would be very equitable across the board to everyone. And we knew that the best way to do this was to do it with numbers, because numbers don't lie. And so we decided to take our formula, and these are the ratings that you have on the evaluation system. You have a demonstrated, which is really no points. You have a developing that we would assign 1 point to, and developing means that you're not quite proficient in a lot of areas, you're still working on it. Proficiency is, like I said, you're just a good, solid teacher in the classroom. Accomplished, which means you're going a little bit above. Maybe you become maybe head of some committees or head of the school improvement team at your school. And distinguished means you really go way over and above. You're doing things for the state. You're being a presenter in other schools. So then that would be assigned the 4 points. So we would assign those points for every rating. And in that, we have 5 standards on that evaluation. So we would assign those with the 5 standards. Now, an average carried to a decimal point is obtained by dividing the total number of points by the total number of ratings given in the time frame on standards 1 through 5 only. So on a teacher evaluation instrument, you have 6 standards, but that 6th standard is your growth standard. And that is not included when it comes to this formula. It's not anywhere. They're not even counting the 6th standard across the state, because that 6th standard has not come into its full reality yet of giving the teachers a final status. The 25% of the teachers in the pool with the highest average rating will be offered the 4-year contracts. So at the end of this year, there will be 2 kinds of contracts. There will be a 1-year contract and there will be a 4-year contract. And for example, like if we have 102 teachers in the pool, then 25 contracts will be offered. Now, if there is a tie, say we get down to the very end somewhere, and there is a tie in the last available contract, the tie can be broken by taking the point value system that we're going to use and going back to the previous year, the 11-12 year, and we work the formula with the evaluation. And we can go back to the 10-11 year if we have to and need to. I don't think we'll ever get that far, but if we have to, we can, because we can go back to 3 years and do the same formula with all 3 of those years. Now, if a tie still remains, say, even after we've done all the 3 years, we can really have an option of doing 1 or 2 things. We can go back in the instrument, and under each major standard on the instrument, they have elements to it, about what constitutes that standard. We can go back, we can put the point value to the elements and rework the formula to break a tie, or we could look at attendance and do a running scale on attendance. And any approved leave or medical leave will not be counted against a candidate for the contract once again. Now, this is what we're proposing. That the assistant superintendent of HR will meet with a 25% pool to explain the process and have the candidate sign an agreement as to whether, if you are selected in the final end to be a part of the 25%, will you or will you not accept this? Because they have a right. They can deny it, or they can accept it. And this is kind of our agreement. And what I'm proposing is that I go to the schools, I have a list, and I know a list now that we have from every school that's eligible, that's in the big pool. So we go there, we present the contract, we say you are in the big pool of this 25%. Now, when we do the point value system, and if you come out as one of the top 25%, are you going to accept this, or are you going to deny it? At this point, when they make that decision, then that will decrease our pool. And that's kind of a good thing, because you know it up front. And that way, if someone denies it at this point, then we could go back and we could say, who was the next person? Till we make up our 25%. Now that's what we're proposing. So, if some employees decline the contract, no additional contracts can be offered by the time it gets to the board. Superintendent presents a list of the selected teachers to the board in a closed session. The board may revise the list at that point, should they choose to do that. And then the board offers contracts to the selected 25, and the final action by law has to be an open session.